The Shudder original Shook was written and directed by Jennifer Harrington, and it follows a group of social media influencers who come under attack one night while dog sitting and live streaming. The film follows Mia as she dog sits for her sister Nicole while she is away getting some tests done, and it really does focus on her for the most part, but her side character friends are also involved as they are live streaming across the city. She was invited to this live stream, they want her to be there, she's being peer pressured to go, but she's saying no, she's sticking to her guns and watching the dog, because get this, there is a dog serial killer on the loose. Now obviously everything comes and collides in one. Mia comes under attack, but so do her friends, and thus it begins a deadly game of live or die. Who do you want to die next? Honestly, at the start of this film, it opened really well, like really well. Right off the bat, you can tell, oh, this isn't going to be exactly what I expect it to be. There's going to be a few little twists and turns in here. It had a really nice opening sequence, some really nice practical effects right off the bat with a good old slasher kill that was quite creative. Even though it wasn't edited the best, it was a good creative slasher kill that I enjoyed. And I thought, here we go, we're in for a good one. Oh my god, I was wrong. Shook has pretty bad acting across the board. I mean, the main protagonist, Mia, is alright, but she's barely passable, and the rest of them you just couldn't care less about. The acting is just as bad as the characters themselves. Everyone in this film is so unlikable. They didn't even give the dog any personality, and yet it was just shit. Every character sucked, there were no character arcs, nobody grows or changes throughout the narrative. They start sucky and end sucky. That's pretty much it. I really did like where they were taking it at some points with this kind of toxic peer pressure culture within friends groups, especially when it comes to these social media influencers, how their online lives can be so different from their real lives, how their real life can actually be kind of depressing even though it looks like it's amazing. I actually really liked that commentary and wish they would have explored that further, but they didn't. As soon as this film starts to do something smart and do something good, it just goes, nope, does a U-turn and goes the other way. It really does have a lot of those like cheesy horror tropes as well, and when it does try to twist and subvert your expectations of them, it just falls flat. Like, honestly, well done for trying a bit and trying to rehash and reinvigorate the slasher genre with something new, trying to make this like a techno thriller slasher, but it just didn't work out at all. There was far too many silly, unbelievable, and probable subplots as well that all kind of intertwined with one another. They never really focused on one and established one as the main narrative, and it just made it a really messy film. So many things have to be convenient for the events of this film to actually happen, and it just never seemed plausible. And due to this, right at the start of the second act, the pace just it grinds to a halt. That's the only way to put it. It just stops, and it's basically someone just walking upstairs, walking downstairs, walking to the sofa, walking back upstairs, hearing something, talking about something pointless. It's just nothing happens, and they're spelling everything out to you. I think one character actually reiterates that they've got a camera that sends them notifications at least 4 or 5 times through the film, and by the third time I was like, I know, I remember, you don't need to keep telling me this, you don't need to keep explaining yourself, I understand your movie, it's not that hard. And it was just so frustrating. It was a real slug to get through. The pacing about halfway at the midpoint looks like it might actually start speeding up, getting somewhere, and it just grinds to a halt again. There's a little shitty twist that you see coming a mile away, then there's another shitty twist later on that you see coming a mile away, and there's these just big chunks of dialogue that could have really been edited down. Like, we did not need them at all. In saying this, there is some decent cinematography in here. Harrington's cinematography is pretty solid, but it really can't save the film. In the beginning of the film, it's pretty static with next to no movement, but it does get better as the film goes on. Almost like she grew in confidence through shooting. So yeah, props to her for that. but it just can't do anything to save this film. Like, sadly, the cinematography that is half decent later on in the film, you just can't see much of it because the lighting is so bad. Like, some scenes in this film, I had my brightness cranked right up, and I was like still struggling to see, like, how am I supposed to feel terror for someone when I can't see the terror in their face? How am I supposed to feel those stakes when I can't see their reaction? Why do I care what they're looking at when I can't see their reaction? Do you know what I mean? It's just little things like that. They were really annoying. Plus, the editing is piss poor. The spatial awareness is just thrown out of the window. Certain times it will cut and someone will be somewhere else where they weren't earlier, and it's not even continuity at that point. It's just knowing the space, filming around it, editing around it, and it felt really choppy and just it wasn't sewn together well. You're not supposed to see the edit or notice it. But here it's too in your face, and yeah, it's really bad. There's also parts that could just be totally cut out, so unnecessary. Like, someone's phone rings, and instead of just answering it, we actually get a shot of them unlocking it, looking at it, answering it, then answering it. And it's like, no, like, you could have cut out like that 4 seconds of absolute redundant bullshit. I didn't need that. Let's keep the film moving. Yeah, it was really annoying. The score for the film was okay in places. I'm a sucker for synth butts, so anytime I hear synth in a score, I'm like, oh yeah, it's not bad. But in other places in this film, it's just very intrusive. And in certain scenes, certain points of the film, it just sounded like someone let their kid run loose on fucking every instrument in GarageBand and then exported it and went, yeah, that'll do fine for the movie. Just chuck it under every scene, it's all good. The mixing is all wrong, and the actual sound design is really not that good for something that's a techno thriller. You've got phone calls and notifications that just don't sound like they're in the scene, they're in that space. It just sounds like a sound effect they've put over it. And yeah, for a techno thriller slasher where there's going to be lots of phone calls, lots of notifications, that ain't good. That is not good. They tried this really interesting thing as well with the visuals where it would split off into different parts, almost like a comic book strip with the different tiles. It had like Instagram tile visuals, and I actually thought that was pretty cool. They also had text that would come out of certain parts of the screen surrounding the main protagonist, closing her in. It never really really made you feel claustrophobic for her, though. I feel like if the barrage of text messages, they put more around her or something, it could have been better. It never worked, which is a shame, because I think it was a really good idea to kind of show certain aspects and different shots all at once as like Instagram tiles on someone's feed. I thought that was quite a good idea, but I think by that point of the film, I was so out of it and I just was not invested at all that I really didn't give a shit. They also done this thing where they'd like project like Instagram feeds up on the wall behind the character that weren't really there, but they were just there for us to see like people's reactions, and it just looked cheap. They could have done away with that. The Instagram tile thing was fine, they could have kept that, but actually using a projector to project those things onto the walls, along with the cheap lighting already, just made it feel even more cheap. But yeah, I just felt like they could have done a lot more with influencers and their fandom, and it's a cool concept. They could have went far with it, but there was just so many things going on, and none of them worked together. There was no synergy. It was just a concoction for a bad time, and I'm really sad in saying that because the last few Shudder movies I've watched I've actually really enjoyed, but this one was a stinker. So with all that said and done, I'm going to give Shook a 0.5 out of 5 rating. That rating's really just for the cinematography alone, but sadly the cinematography is never going to save this film, as everything else just is done very poorly. And yeah, if you've got Shudder, skip this one. Go watch Terrified. Go watch The Dark and the Wicked. Go watch anything else pretty much. I thought this was going to be the next host, but it really wasn't. This is not good. I do not recommend it. If you enjoyed this, leave it a like. And if you're new here, subscribe. As always, thank you very much for watching, and good night.